On January 25th of this year, I crossed the border into Canada with my family. My husband, Matt, who's somewhere up there, and our two senior rescue dogs, Nora and Carl. It had been a move that took us 9 days from our home in Scotland down to England, a dog-friendly flight to New Jersey, and finally up across the border. We moved because for a year I had a stalker, a woman in her 60s, which is, I am told, an unusual demographic to be a stalker. This did not come from me. And her name isn't worth remembering, but also one that I will never forget. After a year of being followed, of being filmed, of worrying if my dogs would be poisoned, after installing a security camera, something I had not needed in anywhere I'd ever lived, it was time to leave. The year had also been filled with court dates where she didn't show up, and nothing happened if you didn't show up. It had also been filled with conversations with my MP, my local counselor. I had logs and film footage. I had complaints from past victims, of which I learned there were many. And so all of this did nothing, and all of these people did nothing, and I learned how deep small town corruption runs. And I left bewildered that every system designed to keep me safe could not. But what I most remember from this time is how it changed me. I had lived a really cool life, and I had never been afraid of anything. And I became someone who was afraid to leave my home, and my stomach hurt every time I left. I went from someone with no history of anxiety to becoming an anxious person, something that is still with me. But the story I want to tell is the leaving Scotland and what comes after the leaving. We had arrived in Britain 9 years before with 4 duffel bags and 2 bicycles. And 9 years later, we were leaving with a very long to-do list, 2 rescue dogs, very nervous, and 5 bicycles. I knew that I needed help, and I've never been very good at asking for help. I'm always happy to give it, but I don't feel that I deserve it. And so at this time, I asked for help. I asked friends across 4 countries for so many things, and every single person said yes. And so we began our journey. Our friend Beth at this time lends us her cottage after our house is no longer our own. We begin making our way down through England and stop for the night in the Midlands, where my friend Lucy, who lives in a van and knits the most beautiful things, met us with dinner and kindness and a friendly face. When we arrived in London, our friend Sue, a dance teacher, let us stay in her flat, told us to make ourselves at home. Friends hugged us goodbye. They promised to visit and made us promise to return. My mind was filled with logistics only, no feelings. Our friend Simon, the only person we knew in London who had a driving license, drove us to the airport, and his warm London accent is the last one I heard before we got on that plane. We arrived in New Jersey, jet-lagged, exhausted, and cold. We stayed in a truly questionable hotel because it allowed dogs, and I cried myself to sleep. The next morning, I remembered that, in fact, my journey did not end at this hotel in New Jersey, and I felt a lot lighter. We began the drive north. We stopped frequently so our dogs could play in the snow, something they had never seen before in that quantity. At the same time, my sister Karina and her partner Kilby picked up the keys to our rental home in Montreal. Karina had thought of 100 small things that I had not thought of that would make life a little easier, because all I could think of was crossing that border. Kilby's mom, a woman I had met once, had rummaged through her closets for mittens, hats, scarves, sweaters, things that we did not have for a winter that was -20 with wind chill. And that is how I arrived in Montreal, overwhelmed, exhausted, and taking each day, one day at a time. In the days that followed, I would be hit with a great sadness. It was a sadness because I had lost faith in people. I had lost my sense of safety and my ability to keep myself safe. I was also angrier than I had ever been. I was angry at everyone who did not help me, of everyone who promised and lied. I was also angry that with all my power and privilege, I could do nothing to help past victims, myself, or put in place anything that will help future victims. 10 months on, that sadness and anger no longer forms my daily life. It sits more in the landscape, and other things have filled that space. I have made friends. I have a lovely community on my street. I've done things I think of as quintessentially Canadian, like portaging and wearing shirts like this. I loved being out in Algonquin Park. My mind was quiet, and I'm grateful to the people who showed me how to do things like be bear safe and paddle a canoe, things I had never done before. I was born in Canada, but I left when I was 6, so for me, this was a whole new country. I have found new ways of being. I grew up in an abusive home, and stalking took me back to that place where I am helpless, and I cannot solve the problem, because I can always solve problems, but I couldn't this time. And when I was so low, I asked all my friends and friends of friends for help, and everyone showed up for me. And that is something I want to remember from this year, is that one story is that something terrible happened to me, something I couldn't control or prevent. And the other side are the dozens of people who have carried me since. Life is really unfair, and bad things will happen. You will move to a village in a picture-perfect part of Scotland, and you will get a stalker, and there's nothing you can do about it. And one of the things I've learned in these last 10 months, when I've given myself space, is that, in fact, the story I told myself of being isolated and alone is not true. I have never been alone, and I am not alone now. Thank you.